welcome to episode 291 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 15th of July 2024. I'm Joe, and with me are Phelim.
Evening.
Graham.
Hello.
And Will.
Hello.
Let's get straight on with our discoveries then. Will, Blue Spy.
This will cause you some concern, I suspect. At RootedCon in Madrid this year, Tar Logic presented a discovery about the Bluetooth audio profile that is a bit of a security concern. If you've got a Bluetooth speaker with a microphone in it, there's a reasonable chance that it will support the Just Works protocol. And the idea here is that it makes it very easy for your phone to discover and connect to a speaker so that you don't have to go through a complex pairing process every time you start up and want to connect to it. For example, putting a pin in. What this chap has done is reverse engineered the way this protocol works and found a flaw in one of the Bluetooth stacks used on common speakers with microphones, which means that it's very easy to connect to these devices without going through the normal connection process, even if they've already been connected to your phone. So the situation is this. You have a speaker connected to your phone, you're listening to some music, you pause the music, whatever, you stop it for a little while, go and do something else. The attacker can discover that speaker, connect to it, and switch the microphone on completely unprompted. And Blue Spy lets you do that. So now you can go and check your devices and see if they are vulnerable to this attack. And if they are, maybe you want to get a new one.
I'm just smashing mine in the background, don't mind me.
Well, presumably my headphones as well, not just speakers.
Yeah, presumably. I mean, they must have all used very similar, if not the same chips underneath and the same Bluetooth stacks. So, yeah, bit of a concern.
And have you tested yours then?
I have not yet. What am I going to do about it realistically? I've got a set of Bluetooth headphones that I use quite often, but I turn them on when I'm using them and turn them off when I've stopped using them. And I've got a Bluetooth speaker that I use in the shower. And again, I turn that on when I'm using it and I turn it off when I'm not. I don't have really any Bluetooth audio devices that I leave switched on when I'm not using them. So I'm not too concerned at this point, he says.
Well, and also, you have to be pretty close to the device. And so I suppose like you could maybe do the house next door or something if you're a terrace or semi-detached. But if you're close enough to connect to Bluetooth, then you're pretty much close enough to just cup your ear with your hand, aren't you?
Yeah, you're probably right. However, if you happen to be like, if the Flowers by Irene van was parked outside your house, then somebody with a decent aerial could potentially, from, I don't know, let's say 500-600 meters away, could connect to your devices and listen in.
Right.
Yeah, and some of those Google smart speakers or the Amazon smart speakers, they operate as remote Bluetooth speakers, and I wonder if they have the vulnerability, because then I guess you've unlocked that super pervasive listening mode.
Yikes.
I think I'm going to try my headphones, which I know will definitely be vulnerable to this.
Well, the good news is that it's really easy to run on a Raspberry Pi. It works with the Raspberry Pi onboard Bluetooth hardware. So if you want to give it a test run, it won't be too difficult to get set up.
I see it's Python. Do I need pip and loads of fucking dependencies, or can I just run a Python script?
Generally, I think it uses the stuff that's already on there. It uses the new Bluetooth stack, new BlueZ stack, Bluetooth Cuttle, along with Pulse Audio to control the device and record and then play back the audio. So it's pretty standard stuff. I don't think you'll have to install a whole bunch of additional stuff.
Phelim, Reladiff.
So I have often wished this existed. Apparently it did exist, but I didn't find it. But I've often had a time where I've wanted to use a comparison between two databases that should have been the same or close to each other, or, well, actually in this case, you could even test between different DB engines, i.e. like Postgres and MySQL or SQLite and whatever. And it is a diffing tool for databases. I've done a very clunky version of this using what I thought was the best idea, was like a SQL dump file and then trying to compare them, and that is just atrocious. And this is a smart way of doing it, using sort of mini hashed chunks of the data from each of the DB that you set up in each of the connection files, and then you can compare them and then show what's different and stuff. Genius tool. I wish I'd known about it before. I am looking forward to having to use it. I haven't got into right now, but I have needed this before, and maybe it can save somebody else.
This looks terribly handy. I'm just looking at the list of supported databases, and it's got a really comprehensive set of databases. ClickHouse, DuckDB, BigQuery, Oracle, Snowflake, MySQL, and SQLite are just a few of the list here. InfluxDB is missing, so I might have to go and add that.
Patches welcome, Will.
Yeah.
SQLite is planned, so it's not working just yet.
Oh, I see. Yeah, you're right. But yeah, I can see a lot of uses for this, and especially in QA and product assurance of products and databases and all kinds of things. So yeah, I think this could be useful.
The DB is the same in both environments. Is it though? Is it? Oh no, it's not. Is it? You dickhead. Been there. My own fault, in fairness, but yes.
Graham, you seem to have stolen one of Will's, MQTT Explorer.
Yeah, so I think Will's found something similar, and it's definitely Will's domain. It's the domain of IoT at home and passing data. MQTT is a really wonderful, really lightweight, I guess it's a protocol. It's like a broker subscribes to a transmission from a device and then pushes data on from there. And I think it's Oasis. The packet format is kind of defined by the capabilities of the device. So that sounds complicated, but basically all kinds of really useful information can be streamed from little embedded devices. And MQTT Explorer makes that much easier to understand because it's a real-time visualization of that data as it comes in. I guess it acts as a broker itself into the app. It's a Qt-based app, as you might guess. So, for example, if you've got a thermostat and it's sending data to MQTT Explorer, it'll show you that it's receiving temperature data. It may have the date or the time. It may have motion sensing. And the packets will appear and the values for those will appear, which you can kind of unfold in a list view on the left. And then cleverly, if you keep it going, it'll chart the values as they change over time. And this is really useful if you're building your own kind of devices in Node-RED or building an interpreter for this data in Home Assistant, both of which I've done for MQTT devices, both creating devices that transmit it and using Node-RED to kind of pass that data to turn it into more kind of aggregated sensor data. It makes it much easier to understand and play with, at least for me in my head.
I've used this. In fact, I've got it installed already. And it is incredibly useful. I didn't know it could draw graphs, though. That's new information and extremely handy. Yeah, what a great application. Easy to use, exactly what you need just to get a snapshot of what's going on the network. Really, really useful. I love it.
Yeah, I've got like a Hildebrand in-home display for our power control, and I wasn't really sure what capabilities it had, but use this app to take a look, and you can see basically everything that's being provided by that on the MQTT stream that it's sending. It's really good.
Well, I have discovered that I can now run VMs on my iPad because UTM is now available in the App Store for iPhones and iPads. Although it is UTM SE, which, Graham, you have dubbed Slow Edition. Now, I tried this with a Debian image on my 2020, I think it is, iPad. And it's just a base model, which I believe has got 3 gigs of RAM, which was just not enough. Not enough CPU power, not enough RAM. Didn't work very well, is the bottom line. Although I was able to get a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse connected to the iPad and somewhat working in the VM, but it was just a bit fucking ropey on that shit old iPad, unfortunately.
Yeah, I tried it as well. UTM is a wonderful project that you used to be able to get in the App Store a couple of years ago that I think it uses something like JIT for super performance normally on normal Macs and on old iOS or unrooted iOS devices, which Apple just doesn't allow. And up until recently, Apple didn't allow anything like this. This, I think, has started to fall into the kind of emulation category that it's allowing now.
Yeah.
Which is progress, I guess, but I couldn't get anything usable out of it either.
What iPad were you trying it on, or was it a phone, or what?
It's an iPad Pro from a couple of years ago, so it's got an M1.
Oh, right. Even on an M1, it was a bit shit.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really disappointing. I thought that with a Pro, it'd be all right.
Yeah, no, I tried the Arch image that you can get from the library there. That didn't work, and I ended up trying to install the latest ARM 64 Ubuntu server, but it took an hour, I kind of gave up.
Right. Oh, this is really disappointing. I thought this had legs, but well, at least you can do it now, and there's a base to work from. Hopefully they can optimize it, because on the Mac, it's an amazing project, as you said. So yeah, they didn't seem to be that bothered about it, because they said that, yeah, well, it's never going to be as good. But hopefully with enough an install base and enough people contributing, it could get there. But yeah, it's just kind of not quite there yet, is it, unfortunately?
I wasn't able to try one of the pre-built images with the kind of Spice acceleration installed. So maybe they're better once they're installed and you've got the proper tools to improve it. I don't know. Well,
I mean, I was able to get to the login screen and I was able to almost log in, and then it was just thinking about it, and then it just didn't have enough RAM and CPU, unfortunately. But I think with an M1, you'd have a much better time with a pre-installed image, or at least I hope so. Well, either way, it's cool that you can somewhat run Linux on iOS now.
I hope this is the start of things to come, and that emulation on iPhones goes forward and gets better. It would be really exciting to see that happen.
It's less exciting on phones to me than iPads, because, you know, you can get a very powerful M1 or even an M3, or no, is it an M4 now, iPad Pro, with a massive screen. So it seems to make more sense to me on tablets rather than phones, but either way, it's kind of a cool trick.
And I know Android's had this forever, but never mind. We're getting there.
Yep. Fadim, Kate org mode.
Yeah, so again, I've not used this, but I discovered it during the week, and I might actually switch to this if it looks promising. So it's from Axeli, which is probably a butchered pronunciation of the user's name, from our Matrix room, possibly Telegram. I'm not 100% sure, but a listener to the show. And it is essentially what Graham does in Vi org mode or Vim org mode, whatever the hell it is, but in Kate, in a decent editor that, you know, humans could use. And it's a plugin for it, context highlighting for the events and scheduling that you have in it. There's a tagging format, and it can be easily done via a plugin in Kate the same way.
What exactly is org mode? I'm aware that we don't often explain things like this.
Well, I haven't used it properly, so I'm a bad example of this, but as far as I can say, it's like to-dos and project planning, and, you know, you need some sort of scheduler to alert you to the fact that a deadline's cropping up and things like that.
Yeah, that's my understanding. I've never used it either. But yes, it basically turns Emacs into kind of an OS, basically, where you can do everything, including your coding and managing all of your tasks and your diary. And we're going to get loads of emails about that now. Sent from Emacs.
Graham, Blade Coder Adventure Engine.
Yeah, so recently I mentioned Ink, which was a new way of developing interactive text adventure games, like of the kind that you found in the very late 70s, like Colossal Cave and then Infocom made famous. After those, I think the next kind of epoch of adventure games are the point-and-click graphical adventures that ScumVM, you know, now emulates so well, and Sierra Online created, and LucasArts.
Police Quest.
Yeah, exactly. Blade Coder Adventure Engine is a graphical point-and-click game creator. I've been looking for stuff to kind of do with the kids that isn't directly programming. And I must admit, I've tried this. It is quite complicated to get your head around. You basically import scenes and the characters, and you define movement in a way that you might in Inkscape. So it's still not super straightforward, but you can create games, and people have created games without writing any code, and it's built for these point-and-click adventure games. It seems really powerful. It looks great. It looks like you can do everything you want, and especially if you're not into coding.
The screenshot, I just glanced at it and immediately thought of the Magnetic Scrolls games of the mid-'80s, things like Fish and Corruption. It looks exactly like those, or at least the vision I have in my head anyway. I'd be quite excited to go and build some of those old games.
And I've just noticed it supports the Ink language, which is the thing I talked about previously. So it looks like you can use that to write the story, and this will create the graphical interactive elements.
Nice.
I used to love those types of games. I really did. Maybe not as much Leisure Suit Larry as I wasn't supposed to be playing that. I wasn't. Well, actually, that had questions at the start. It was actually quite hard to beat if you didn't know popular culture in the early 80s. What was the one in space? You were the...
Space Quest.
Oh, Space Quest, yeah. Space Quest, Police. I used to love Police Quest.
I actually really liked the first couple of Leisure Suit Larrys. I mean, legitimately, they were quite good fun to play.
Oh, yeah, I just wasn't supposed to be playing them. That's...
Yeah.
Well, if our episodes had titles, this one would be called Ken Sent Me.
Oh, Jesus. Wow.
Good work. Good work, that man.
Okay, this episode is sponsored by people who support us with PayPal and Patreon. Go to latenightlinux.com/support for details of how you can support us too. Patreon supporters have the option to listen to episodes without ads like this. And it's not just this show. There's 2.5 admins about system administration, Linux Matters for upbeat, family-friendly adventures, Linux After Dark for silly challenges and philosophical debates, Linux Dev Time about developing with and for Linux, Hybrid Cloud Show for everything public and private cloud, and Ask the Hosts for off-topic questions from you. You can even get some episodes a bit early. We've got a lot going on, and it's only possible because of the people who support us. So, if you like what we do and can afford it, it would be great if you could support us too at latenightlinux.com/support. Let's do some feedback then. An anonymous person got in touch via Mastodon. They say, I follow many of the Late Night Linux family podcasts, from 2.5 admins to Linux Matters. They're part of my daily commute and have been for several years, so thank you, Anon. However, they go on to say, but last week I finally had to unsubscribe from Late Night Linux. It's just so unrelentingly negative. Nothing is ever good enough. There's always a dark cloud behind every silver lining. The world is a dark place already. The last thing I need is people trying to make it even worse. So I thought, yeah, let's talk about this. I mean, it's true. We are a bunch of miserable bastards.
If Anon there is willing to accept compromise, then maybe they're best to be gone.
It's too late. They've already gone.
Oh, yeah, that's a fair point.
They're not going to hear any of this.
Shit.
And, thanks for the positive message. That's really upped my day.
But are we too negative? It's funny. I asked myself this question when I used to do my own show. And, that was a question that I asked myself and the audience, and some people wrote in. And I used to be, can you believe it, even more negative than I am now. And my answer to this question is, we cover the news roughly every couple of weeks, unless there's nothing happening. And the news is always bad. So what do you want from us? Do you want us to say that everything is awesome and practice toxic positivity? I think not, really. I mean, yeah, what do we do? Just ignore negative news. Okay, that's one solution. But you can't just bury your head, can you?
There's a certain amount of self-selecting in the news that we choose to talk about, though, right? We do tend to find more interest in stories which are negative than we do about ones which are positive. But I don't know, I feel like we cover at least one positive story a week, don't we?
Well, if we do, someone, Phelim, will shit on it.
So, that's an outrageous accusation of truth.
If it's not fucking KDE, you're negative about it. Let's face it.
Oh, that's not true. Sometimes.
And I feel like I'm the Chris Martin of Late Night Linux.
All right.
I'm always bringing positivity and joy and telling everyone how wonderful open source is, and it's great that the community works together, and it's amazing where we are now after all this time.
You do make pretty terrible music, so you might be right.
No!
Only joking. Your music is not bland and terrible. It's esoteric and terrible.
Actually, I watched a bit of that Glastonbury gig, and whatever you think about Coldplay, I think getting 100,000 people happy on a Sunday or Saturday evening is pretty good. So I'm not going to knock Coldplay.
No, I'm not really. I like that Fix You tune of theirs. I think it's pretty good. And Yellow as well is all right. They've got some, they can write a catchy tune. Fair play to them.
They're more U2 than U2 these days.
In order to bring a bit of balance, I thought they were shit.
You see, every time I try and escape, you pull me back in.
One of us.
I just think that it's funnier to be negative, isn't it? If you're all positive about stuff, it's just not very funny and entertaining. Whereas, you bring up, I don't know, a large non-profit that might make a bit of open source software, maybe a browser or something. There's lots to poke fun at there. But, the Mozilla thing, that's always done with love, isn't it? We all want them to succeed and be better.
I wonder if this is a Britishism where we are just miserable quite a lot of the time compared to sunny Americans.
It might well be that this person is American and they're used to that have a nice day business. Like, can you imagine someone in England telling you to have a nice day? You'd look at them and go, what?
Fuck off.
Fuck you on about? Like, it's just part of our culture to be miserabilists, I think.
Well, we're not just British. I feel like sticking up for Phelim here.
Yeah, fair.
We've got
That's
the
fair.
EU represented.
This word is going to sound bad, but in Ireland, people are knockers. And that is not the British sense of the term knockers, which means boobs, in case anybody doesn't know. But we like to knock people. It's like you don't go past the guy in the fancy house and say, oh, one day I'm going to work real hard and strive to be there and live the dream. It's like, oh, look at that prick in his big house. That's kind of, and you can't get away from that attitude. And even if it's for stuff that you love, like Foss, you know, you want it to be as good as it can be. And, you know, every time it doesn't meet expectations. It's fucking annoying and it needs to get called out.
Yeah, I think that the Irish and the British are culturally very similar in a lot of ways. Obviously, there are differences. But I think in this particular sort of being quite different from Americans, we are quite similar.
If you were to be serious with somebody or sound like you're being serious with them, say, oh yeah, you know, I think you want to kind of do that. That's actually really offensive. That means that you don't like the person. Whereas if you take the piss out of somebody and tell them how shit they are, how much of a useless fat bastard they are, that's a compliment. That means you've made it in. You know, it's just the way it is. It's just banter.
Well, it's much like how English people will often use the very worst word that starts with C in a sort of friendly way with their friends. You'll call them that word. And Americans would just be horrified by it, whereas it's just something that, well, at least working class people just call each other. It's, you know, Royale with cheese and all that. I think that it just comes down to the fact that there are some podcasts that are relatively similar in subject to us who are relentlessly positive, let's just say. And every release of the thing is the best ever, and every bit of software is awesome. And I mean, we do have our discoveries where we discover really cool stuff and we are positive about it. But at the same time, we're not just going to say that everything is awesome. This isn't the fucking Lego movie.
I think it's exhausting.
Much like this conversation is exhausting and we should probably end it. Right, well, we better get out of here then. We'll be back next week when, who knows, might be news, might be a random thing. But until then, I've been Joe.
I've been Phelim.
I've been Graham.
And I've been Will.
See you later.